Well, the scenes this morning driving in through South London were very like yesterday, I must say. Some garages with absolutely no fuel at all, some with unleaded and no diesel, some the other way round. And you can see massive queues forming at some of these stations. And once people get close to the pumps and a moped comes and jumps in, it all starts to get really unpleasant. Lots and lots of arguments. And we'll talk about those queues and how nurses and doctors and others can somehow jump those queues, which is going to be very difficult, I think, on some of those roads. Some really bad behaviour, I think, violence, all sorts of extraordinary things going on. This particular example was somebody actually, taking out a knife and threatening somebody. I mean, it is pretty disturbing stuff. Now, you could argue that we see this in our major cities on Friday and Saturday nights, but this is going on in petrol stations. It's horrible, it's awful, and we will tonight talk about how key workers can get priority without even more aggravation, and how on earth staff in those stations will be able to decide who is entitled to petrol or diesel and who is not. But what we have here going on right now are two major energy crises. The first is supply of electricity and gas and the cost of it, and the fact that successive governments have gone unthinkingly for wind energy. I guess it's a way of showing their virtue, not just to the British public, but to the G7, the UN, and the wider world. And what we learnt, of course, in the first half of September is that when the wind doesn't blow, when we get calm weather, far from providing 25% of our energy needs, it provides about 2%. And that's where the rising price of gas, and actually a bit of a shortage of natural gas, has really come into play. And so we've seen energy firms going bust, household bills set to rise, but even more disturbingly, because we do not have proper storage facilities for natural gas. France and Germany have about 20% of their annual needs in storage, strategic storage. We have 1.7%. It's not impossible that at some point the lights literally could go out. So if you're driving a Tesla today, I reckon you're feeling pretty smug, but you won't feel very smug if the lights go out at some point this winter. Indeed, given how computerized we are, everything would come crashing down. Successive governments have failed strategically to think about reliable energy and have put us into this mess. We now need to have proper leadership and a real debate about how nuclear fits in to all of this. But of course, the more immediate energy crisis is the panic at the pumps. And it is panic, I have to say. You've seen some of that terrible behaviour, but people genuinely worried. And not just key workers. I met a chap this morning. I went to the local petrol station. There was no petrol, but I bought some newspapers. A chap said, well, my mum's moving house tomorrow. We're just not sure now whether she'll be able to. So this is affecting absolutely everybody. Some are telling us that there are signs today of the panic easing as deliveries increase to petrol stations. Well, we'll find out over the course of the next few days. I'm not absolutely convinced. I think once panic set in, people will keep rushing to each station that opens. But this in many ways was predictable. There has been a shortage of lorry drivers. Even before the Brexit referendum, folks, we were 50,000 HGV drivers short. Monsieur Barnier was in London today saying this, of course, is all a consequence of Brexit. Well, actually, in many ways, it's EU membership that put the HGV industry into this mess, because it allowed the hauliers to go for cheap foreign labour, which drove the prices of people that drive these trucks down to about £11 an hour. £11 an hour for a job that gives you a huge degree of responsibility, for a job that often means sleeping in cabs, in lay-bys, in service stations, often in some pretty unsafe places. Not surprising that many people have opted just not to stay as HGV drivers. So far from leaving the European Union being the cause of this problem, actually what we're now seeing are wages going up and hopefully people attracted back into it. But this isn't going to happen because the real problem here is the DVLA. They've been way behind during the whole of COVID, working from home. There was a strike there in August, and from what I can see, Grant Shapps has done precious little to deal with it. It is a failure of his leadership. And as for the plans, it'll be okay, guys, because 150 army lorry drivers who are regulated to carry hazardous materials, they're going to come in and save the situation. We'll just have a think about this. There are 8,500 petrol stations and forecourts in this country. Frankly, this doesn't scratch the surface. The problem is there at the DVLA. The problem is that we have a government who seem to court short-term popularity based on what focus groups say, rather than looking ahead and anticipating problems. And frankly, the rest of the world is now laughing at us. And Boris Johnson, since he got back from America until about an hour and a half ago, had not said a single thing about this mounting crisis that is affecting pretty much every family in the land. And Boris Johnson, you'll learn something here. You may have been very popular, but if people start to view you and your government with contempt, your popularity will fall off a cliff. So he did, 90 minutes ago, say some words about this crisis. Let's hear him.
We now are starting to see the situation improve. We're hearing from industry that supplies are coming back onto the forecourts in the normal way. And I would just really urge everybody to just go about their business in the normal way and fill up in the normal way when you really need it, and things will start to improve. What we want to do is make sure that we have all the preparations necessary to get through till Christmas and beyond, not just in the supplying the petrol stations, but all parts of our supply chain. I think what happened with the fuel issue with the petrol pump business was that, unfortunately, there was a slightly misleading account of something which got leaked and caused a big, totally understandable surge in public demand. We think we can, the actual number of lorry drivers that were short in that particular sector isn't very big, but generally there is a shortage in that profession around the world, and what we want to see is an emphasis on high wage, a high skill, a high productivity approach to our economy.
Well, that was the Prime Minister. I hope that inspired confidence in you. It didn't in me. He talks about shortages of drivers all over the Western world. Well, he's right. That is right. What he didn't say was there is a backlog of 50,000 HGV people who've applied to the DVLA in Swansea, and they are waiting to be processed. So I'm not particularly convinced that he is going to grip this.